Welcome to Peer Check. I am your guest host, MJ Peters. I'm the VP of Marketing at CoLab, and I am guest hosting this episode because we're going to do something a little bit different today. So I have on the podcast Adam and Jeremy as guests, and they're going to take us through the story of CoLab. So Adam and Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for filling in, MJ.
All right. So we're going to talk about why you started CoLab and basically dig into the problem that you saw and why we are out here solving it. So let's start from the beginning. You guys both went to school for engineering. Adam, what made you want to be an engineer?
Jeremy and I are both from Newfoundland, the furthest east you can go in Canada. Little place, engineering school here. I think for me, it was my dad. My dad was an engineer. Took great pride in engineering, and I like science, I like math, and I realized I wasn't going to make it pro in sports early on, and I said, I need to figure out something that was a little more reasonable for my life. And at the time, my dad was actually sick with cancer in high school, and I just remember how much it meant to him on the engineering side, and I remember just thinking, I'm going to try it. Anyways, did that, went through that process, and started engineering, and I actually hated it for the first semester. I told my dad famously that I was going to drop out, and I was dead serious. People don't believe me, but I was dead serious. I just couldn't see what the benefit was because it wasn't really engineering at that point. It was more like random classes all over campus. And my dad said, stick through it for one more semester. Anyways, I did that, found why I loved it, got on that first work experience, and from there, it's been a life-changing thing for me. It's been part of who I am, and I saw why he cared. So I wasn't the type of guy who knew I wanted to do engineering, but I did it for my father. And 10 years later, here I am now, trying to do it for engineers all over the world.
And Jeremy, you also attended the same university as Adam in mechanical engineering out in Newfoundland. Did you always know that you wanted to start a company, or did you originally go into mechanical engineering thinking, I'm going to go have a career in mechanical engineering?
Yeah, definitely the latter. In Newfoundland, entrepreneurship and technology, even for a long time, wasn't like a known or understood career path. So, I don't have a great reason for why I wanted to be an engineer. I never have really. I think being in high school, I was more interested in and kind of excelled at, physics and math and those sort of subjects. And again, being in Newfoundland, there's only one university. Your options in terms of what you can do there for an undergrad are relatively limited. And so I think it was almost just like an assumption, like these are the, courses I'm good at, so this is what I will do in university. And I never really challenged it much, never really thought about it too much, and went into that career path. Having said that, I was always interested in, technology in particular. And so I think I saw engineering as a way to get into that field. And same as Adam, kind of got in, started doing the work terms in particular, and we got to do, I think, like 6 different work terms in our undergrad, so that was awesome. And that really exposed us to a lot of different like verticals, industries, and different things. And I think the nail in the coffin for me, I think, was working at Tesla. Like that was kind of the holy grail for me. It was both technology and automotive, which are 2 places I was like 2 topics I'm super interested in and always have been. So, and Silicon Valley, I guess, as like a third. I've just always taken an interest in Silicon Valley. So I was like, this is it. Like this is going to be the one that I really love and enjoy. And I got there, and it was good. And don't get me wrong, but I still left feeling like I just want to be my own boss. I guess I want to pursue my own interests. I remember saying to Adam, like, we were at the time putting so much time and effort into a lot of different things, and it's like, what if we took all this and kind of just put it into, chasing our own dreams or doing our own thing? It'd probably be successful.
And it's pretty successful. Cool. So we're going to unpack that Tesla experience in just a second. But before we do that, you both shared another really important experience during your undergraduate years that you cite all the time, which is the Hyperloop Contest. You competed in the Hyperloop Contest, I think, multiple times when you were in undergrad, and it sounds like a really instrumental experience in shaping both of your careers and possibly CoLab itself. So, Adam, can you tell me a little bit more about Hyperloop?
Yeah, so 2015, I was sitting down having a beer with one of my classmates, and he tells me about this like new thing Elon Musk came up with. And at the time, I wasn't following Elon like super closely. And I remember seeing the white paper. It was like a napkin sketch and like a 50 or 70 page paper that said, this new mode of transportation. And I literally told my buddy no. I was like, not interested, got a job right now, full-time offer lined up, don't need to worry about this. But he really wanted to work in the Bay Area, and it meant a lot to him, and he's one of my close friends. So eventually I agreed to do 1 hour a week and join this Hyperloop team. This team was connected, remember, small place in Newfoundland, but it was partnered up with like Cornell, University of Michigan, Harvey Mudd, Princeton, Northeastern. It was like all the big schools. So we did that, and that grew arms and legs really quickly. And I think we surprised ourselves. It was like, as a guy from Newfoundland, I was used to getting crushed in sports at a national level, and just always assumed that was kind of similar for my career. That this is as far as it could go. There wasn't this like bigger opportunity, but we entered this competition with 1,200 teams. Somehow found ourselves in the top 150, and then saw the light to the top 30. And at that point, I was like, man, holy crap! Like maybe we really could do this, and started to actually really move forward. We had a lot of trouble though, like going from there to eventually 2 years later coming second in the world. And that's when I convinced Jeremy. So Jeremy convinced me to start CoLab. I convinced Jeremy to join Hyperloop. So I don't know who's guilty in this whole process. It's a bit of a circle. But I convinced Jeremy because I knew he was really good at general CAD work in general, mechanical design, like all the things we help today with the CoLab. But I knew he was just good at it. I knew he cared. And I knew he had that knack for building. Anyways, we spent the next year and a half, basically sitting on Google Meets every single night, trying to like basically co-design these insane vehicles across 6 universities, building it on timelines that made no sense, with budgets that did not make sense either. And we kind of thought it was like a student problem that we couldn't figure out how to work together. Then we end up down at the same time, Jeremy's at Tesla, which I'll tell you about in a minute, I'm sure. I'm at Reflection Medical. We'd previously both done Fortune 500 companies. And it's like everything you compared worked almost the exact same way. And our software buddies were right next to us, and they had none of these problems. Like they were never talking about, how do you find the latest file? And like, how do you communicate with someone about a design issue? There was like a system that had been built for 20 years. And after the Hyperloop team built this like 20-foot long, 2,000 pound vehicle that floated on an air cushion and somehow got up to, I think we got up to 105 kilometers an hour before we had to end the first test, we didn't really believe that we could do this. Did that, looked at all the similarities and said, maybe there is something bigger here that we should be working on that's not a vehicle physically, but it was a vehicle for us to learn, how to go after solving hard problems. And I think, that kind of takes us into Jeremy's story, what felt like the final nail in the coffin for him, which was Tesla.
Yeah, so in 2015, you guys are working together on Hyperloop. You realize that even from Newfoundland, you can be the best in the world at something. You start working closely together for the first time. And then, yes, in 2016, both of you end up in internships in California, all the way from Newfoundland. And Jeremy, as you mentioned earlier, you were at Tesla. So tell me about your role there and what it was like.
Yeah, so I was a mechanical design intern on the battery pack team. At the time, we were working on the Model 3 program. Of course, it was like crunch time in fall of 2016 to get designs complete in order to kick off manufacturing. So I kind of just hit it at the right time in terms of this pain point. We were really like rushing to get things finalized, to kick off soft tooling with suppliers. But me in particular, I worked on a number of plastics components and a wire harness for the battery pack. And, I think one of my big takeaways from the experience was just that the way that engineers kind of collaborate on design, and particularly computer-aided design, is not great. It didn't feel super modern. Like we were students coming from this world of using G Suite and Slack and all these things. And we'd kind of grown up in that like cloud collaboration era. In the workplace, the tools we were using were email and spreadsheets and PowerPoint decks and those things. And again, particularly when it came to working with outside sort of stakeholders, so we were working with suppliers in Asia, particularly on plastics components, and the way that we collaborated was sharing the files. They would create like a PowerPoint deck of their feedback, send it to me. I would respond in line in the PowerPoint deck to their to their comments, and then send that back to them, and then that would go on and on for weeks. And I just felt like if you had sort of modern collaboration tools here, like similar to the G Suites and the Slacks of the world, this process would be so much easier and so much faster. And then I started thinking about like what the overall impact that something like that could have on, the Model 3 program, for example, which was a hot topic at the time. But then more broader, like all engineering sort of initiatives and engineering companies. So for me, that was a bit of the genesis or the origin of CoLab and the idea we're still working on today. So.
Yeah, and I think I once asked you to tell me about a day in the life of an engineer working with these outdated processes, and you told me a story that I think really brings home like how difficult it can be to communicate with a supplier that's overseas. So why don't you tell us about your vacation in the national park?
Yosemite, the Yosemite story, yeah. So Adam and I were planning a trip, I guess, with some friends out to Yosemite. And again, this was in like crunch time. So I was trying to kick off soft tooling with a supplier on a plastics part. And for me, I because this process was so inefficient in a way, like sending these PowerPoint decks back and forth. Every time I got one from them, I wanted to turn it around like immediately, like as fast as I could. So I remember distinctly like this one Friday we had driven out there. It's like, I don't know what it is from San Francisco now, like 4, 5, 6 hours or something. We left after work, so we didn't get out there till like 12 o'clock. And I don't know, I guess on the way I'd received a deck back from them with all these comments. And I just remember being in like the Airbnb or the lodge we were staying at Yosemite at like 12 or 1. We're waiting for our friends to show up, and I'm like, I guess I'll do this now. So it just bleeds into like your personal life and your spare time, right? It's like 1 a.m. I'm at a lodge in Yosemite just responding to DFM comments on this plastics component. And I don't think that's too out of the ordinary for the way that engineering teams were working.
Yeah, and to your point, right, the alternative would have been for you to wait until Monday to turn that deck back around for them, and then it's Tuesday for them. And if you multiply that across all the engineering teams working on a Model 3, like how many more years would it take to launch that product to market?
Totally.
So Adam, you're at the same time at Reflection Medical. Were you running into the same types of challenges there?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is we did this across, Tesla, one of the companies moving the fastest, still had this. And Reflection was not immune. We worked at Fortune 500. It was all sort of the same, just different particular pockets for different people. So for me, I was working on this cooling system design at Reflection, and the guy that I worked most closely with, he worked from like 5 o'clock till 2 o'clock. Like he worked just different hours because he wanted to avoid rush hour. Totally fair. Rush hour is terrible there. So they used to drive in. He'd be gone 2 o'clock. I worked the opposite basically. I worked like 10 o'clock till 6 o'clock for my core hours. So there was that 4-hour block every single day where I would basically not be able to work on that program, that part of my job, because it was all locked away in the inbox or in something that was offline, things that weren't updated in the real model. There was no direct link to the supplier. And we were here also, similar to Jeremy, trying to get first prototypes built to actually go through the FDA process. So there was a rush to get through that process. It can be long in medical once you get there and you go through the actual like red tape. But trying to get to the place where you can start that process is, there's a lot going on. And we felt that. And then you look back across the student team stuff, only because we did sheer brute force, we would never finish that project. Like there was nothing sustainable, repeatable, scalable about how we did it. And it required us staying up for 20 and 22 hours a day for 10 days at a stretch, right before the final, run in an Airbnb where we worked in our garage all night to actually get there. There was nothing good about how we did that design. It's just that we worked hard and we were lucky at the end of the day. And I think so many engineering projects that we see are like that. And the crazy part is everyone's now starting to want to change it. Before we talked about being a problem, now you hear from like the top down saying, okay, automotive design cycle is going to go from 60 months or 56 sub 40 because they have to, because new EV programs are going that fast. Talked to a product company, it used to be a couple of years, now they want to do sub 12 months. And I was like, you think about efficiency and do 100% better, you're still not going to likely do that. And you're not going to get there without a big change. And I think that today, whether it was at Reflection, Tesla, or any other company in the world, I think we saw over and over again. And 4 years later, here we are.
Jeremy, Adam mentioned earlier that you ultimately talked him into starting CoLab. So both of you were experiencing these problems. You knew each other. You had worked together closely. How did you start that conversation about let's go out and fix this?
Yeah, honestly, we were talking about how this all formed out of the problem we were experiencing, but kind of in parallel, we just had identified that we wanted to be entrepreneurs and we were interested in entrepreneurship. So I think the conversation really started with hey, there's this thing at our university at the time called an entrepreneurial work term. So we were doing work terms with companies. You also had the option to take a work term and do it on something entrepreneurial and get paid for it. And so we kind of started there. We're both interested in this. What are the problems that at play? And we actually just started whiteboarding things out and talking about it. And this was one that kind of, I guess, resonated with us, and we felt like it was an exciting kind of challenge to tackle. So that's how it kind of initially started. Was hey, who'd be interested in doing entrepreneurial work term? We're both interested. What problems do we have? Yeah, this one again felt like the one we really wanted to tackle. So from there, it wasn't quite that straightforward. We kind of made that decision, but then we also were yeah, but we'd also love to work in the Valley for a work term. And so being indecisive, I suppose. And then we both managed, like you said earlier, to get work terms there at the same time. So we did that. We were kind of thinking about this, talking about it on the side. And I had so many other things going on at the time that we didn't really make a ton of progress until we actually graduated. But that's when it started to get challenging because this Hyperloop kind of experience had occurred. We were, kind of soliciting job offers from a lot of different companies, a lot of exciting companies. Neuralink is one that I remember in particular at the time. They were reaching out and asking if we'd be interested. I remember I had an interview with Google that summer that ultimately never went anywhere, but it was kind of challenging to look at that. Tesla had offered to come back and work there full time. There were a lot of opportunities kind of at that time, and it got challenging then trying to decide to actually do it and keep doing it and really commit. And we talked to one of our kind of startup advisors at the time at the university, and he said a lot of things, but he made some I guess the main point being you're never gonna do this if you don't do it now. Now's the best time to do it. If you're able to come up with excuses not to do it now, you're gonna be able to come up with a whole lot in the future. And I think that just really struck a chord, and so we kind of flew to LA, I think, shortly after that, and just pen and paper pros and cons about it for a bit. But I don't think we really needed to do that. I think we had already kind of come to the conclusion. So it didn't take a ton of convincing, to be honest, but it was a little touch and go for a moment there, just because we had so many other things that we could have done.
Mm-hmm. Adam, did it feel like a big risk for you to take to jump into this company as opposed to going down the path of the different job offers that were in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, when we first were thinking about this, we both actually had job offers. I was going to go back to Reflection. He was going back to Tesla. Then Hyperloop made it worse because we did well in that competition. So we started getting a bunch of others. So on top of our initial decision to go focus on CoLab, right after we decided that, we started getting other distractions. So I think for us, it was always a little bit tricky. I personally felt it because I mentioned earlier I got into engineering because of my dad. My dad passed away right after my first year from cancer, and Reflection builds a biology-guided radiotherapy machine that's targeting late-stage metastatic cancer. And I felt very emotionally connected to the work I was doing there. So I found it really hard just to step away from that from a personal perspective. But it was at a good point, honestly. They were getting ready to go through FDA approval. I felt it was a cool chapter for me to be part of, and felt like that was something I could feel okay about. But honestly, I agree with Jeremy. We would have went back and worked 50 hours a week at a full-time job, and then try to do this for another 30 or 40 because that's just who we were, and we would never have actually been here right now doing this because it would have failed. Even the number of hours we do today is not quite enough. Sometimes it feels, and that's with full focus on building this company. Because I always tell people regardless if it's building a company or something else, if your brain is focused on only one thing. If you're doing 20 hours doing 2 things and you're doing one thing for 40, it's not a 2x improvement, it's a 20x improvement. because not having that like scattered mind and context switching constantly is like a superpower for trying to do something. And I think for us, we didn't understand nor appreciate that back then.
Take
To give you
notes, Elon.
perspective, I actually started two companies at the same time, so really didn't take my own advice, but I learned the lesson at the end of 2017 and fully committed to Collab. So beginning of 2018, that's really when Collab became. Jeremy and I shook hands. Most people don't know this, but Jeremy was actually the CEO at the time. I was our COO and CBDO or something else, and we literally just switched jobs, and we didn't give Jeremy that title, became CTO,
Thankfully.
and we said we're not going to give up on this, and here we are 4 years later.
The CBDO, for those of you that are unfamiliar with that prestigious title, is Chief Business Development Officer. So just put a footnote in there. Okay.
It was also MJ on the most beautiful business cards. Very washed out, pink, orange, purple, red gradient with a logo that I think we bought from someone for $20. So it was, things were a little different back then.
Things were a little different. Okay, so it's 2018. We're both committed. What's the initial concept for the product?
Yeah, we went back and forth on a number of things. I think originally we were looking at like actual kind of CAD assembly collaboration. Like how can you kind of have two people working on a CAD assembly at the same time, and then bolting like today's Collab on top of that. And had a bunch of conversations with people, and I think like good entrepreneurs, I think we felt out this pain point that was a lot more tangible around the sort of supplier collaboration, design review collaboration part, and decided pretty early on to pivot and focus on that instead. So I don't remember, we had a lot of hesitations at the time around like, is this just GrabCAD? Why is this not just GrabCAD? And we had to think about that a lot, and it gave us a lot of pause. I think we've since carved out a really interesting niche there. But yeah, I mean, it's I always say we haven't made any serious pivots really, which is always nice. We've never had to like rip up the product and throw it away and start over. So that's positive.
So for people who are not familiar, what is GrabCAD?
Yeah, GrabCAD is like an online sort of forum for sharing CAD models. It's sort of like a public thing, but at the time they had built out I think it's called Workbench, which is like a lightweight cloud PDM tool, and you could go in like in the web and do some basic sharing and markup capabilities and such. So yeah, I remember at the time, like we had to really, convince ourselves, like, why is this not GrabCAD? But we, kind of came around.
And
I still think honestly, like if you look back on the GrabCAD journey, like we've met with the folks over time, they just went a different route. Like the idea and why they started that, very similar. Like I think had they kept focusing there and not getting really hardcore into 3D printing with Stratasys, might be a different conversation 4 years later. Because like when we started, the very first idea was almost a little bit like Onshape, but for SolidWorks in particular, because that's what we felt the most pain in. But I think we realized pretty quickly that that wasn't the crux. I think the main example, Jeremy and I did our first ever sales presentation for a really cool company down in the Bay Area. 55 minutes on this product, which was basically like the Onshape for SolidWorks. Last 5 minutes, we bring up what Collab is today, which was just an idea, and just said like, hey, we're thinking about working on this. And they would have kept us there for another hour if they had the time. Because they didn't speak for 55 minutes. And then the last 5 minutes, it was like, oh, hold on now. Like, we're trying to do this with our suppliers in Asia. We're back and forth all the time with multidisciplinary review. And at that point, we were like, oh, maybe this is not what we should be doing. Our first employee started 7 days later, or like 3 days later. And his first day, we said, hey, man, you know that product we hired you to build? Yeah, we're not building that one anymore, and here's what we're doing. And anyways, he's still here almost 5 years later, helping us build the product. So yeah, that was probably the biggest pivot. There's been lots of micro pivots, though. I would say, Jeremy, I think it's we're not immune to how many micro pivots we've made. Just no massive change.
when you say Onshape for SolidWorks, what do you mean by that?
So Onshape, I mean, you could have one model in your browser, me, you, Jeremy, all editing at once. The problem with SolidWorks is that you had to check in, check out, whereas Onshape is more like you branch. It's almost like a developer writing code and you merge things back together, but you can see it all in real time. So we were trying to figure out how could you connect like multiple desktop computers together with the same file. So if MJ made a change to my part, I wouldn't need to say, oh, there's been 47 changes and it breaks the model. You could actually see MJ's change in context. So you could just basically break it, like remove that entire check-in, check-out process, which for us as students at the time, man, it used to be like days and weeks wasted. And for us, that was a lifetime. So we were trying to cut that out of our process. And we saw it everywhere else too. But I mean, ultimately the problems, there's a bunch of technical problems. And what we learned, I think early on, was that we as students were really working really closely together on everything. That's not how it works at the part level. At the assembly level, yes. At the part level, though, somebody typically owns them, and they're not really like MJ and Jeremy actually modeling on the exact same part at the same time all that often. And they actually like having a little bit of separation. And we learned a bunch of things there, which when that was our only value proposition, that made it a hard sell. Onshape does a whole bunch of other stuff, which, I think is still totally legitimate. Just the problem is you need to switch your CAD tools, switch your PDM tools, switch your PLM. Like, it's a hard lift for big companies, which, ultimately is where I think we fit today.
Mm-hmm. So, Jeremy, why do you think what CoLab has ultimately built is better than that original idea of Onshape for SolidWorks?
It's definitely broader. I mean, we're not focused on any one particular CAD system now or CAD ecosystem. It's more of a generic, CAD file sharing and review tool. So I think it's a bit bigger, it's a bit broader, and part of our sort of beliefs now are that this CAD ecosystem is a little too fragmented and siloed, and it's part of what's causing some of these challenges. These large companies have their own proprietary tools and formats, and they like to work within them, and they like to encourage their customers to work within them. And it creates a lot of separation and data interchange problems. And so us as a company, that's kind of just something that we are excited about changing and kind of changing that in the industry. And so I think that fits well with the sort of broader kind of problem we're tackling now. We want to bring together people working in different ecosystems and different tool sets and allow them to collaborate more easily and not have to worry about that as much anymore. So broader both in market but also in problem and challenge we're trying to solve. So
it seems like this idea of people not having to switch their PLM or their PDM or the CAD that they're using is really critical to what CoLab stands for.
Yeah, there's definitely like a niche that we've kind of carved out there, is focusing on larger companies who already have established design and data management tools, and CoLab is a system that engages with those well, and we're not aiming to replace them, and that in itself is a value prop, I think. And I think it's just a really strong and interesting marketing position we've been able to establish.
Adam, tell me about some of the customers along the way that shaped the future of CoLab or that were really important. Are any of those customers still with us today?
Yeah, we've got some that go back a while. Like, I think the one I think of first is probably someone like Hyundai Mobis. I remember at the time we were probably like not that far removed from making that pivot. Trying to figure out really what this was. We didn't really know how we fit in the landscape, all these tools, but we knew we added value. And working with them early on, there was a guy there who just like saw the vision and had a massive problem, which was like he was trying to work between the OEM and a bunch of tier twos, one to win this contract with one of the big auto OEMs, and then figure out how to get all the data to them without buying like a couple $100,000 worth of Team Center licenses that were so complicated that nobody could figure out how to use. So anyways, we come in and roll this out to like this guy. He builds this like 70 slide 3D presentation in CoLab, all annotated. And at the time, that tool didn't work very well, so he was very patient. And he presents this back to the OEM, and a couple months later, he's calling us, telling us that they won that contract for the next couple of years. And we were like, holy crap, like that's pretty crazy. They showed CoLab as the means for describing how they would assemble and build all these pretty complex assemblies. And then they just continued to do it. Like they started sharing it them in their supply chain. Every file that got shared out came from there. And and then you see the next division using it and other people using it and other OEMs coming in. And that was, that many years ago now, and still today, same relationship, group that we still talk to all the time about, where we're going with this. That's like a completely random company that we happened to just meet off LinkedIn at the time, who took a shot on this when it was really early. And now I think people are seeing how that worked. And now it's much more people kind of like, oh, I get this. And there's like some real credibility behind where it fits. And like Jeremy said, right? Like, we're not trying to replace your PLM. We never want to, because those tools are really hard to replace. And honestly, like, replacing the PLM or making it better is like maybe like a 10% improvement. What's actually got this massive opportunity is how your teams work together, the effectiveness, right? It's not an efficiency play, it's an effectiveness play. It's like, fundamentally we need to do something different, not do the same thing a little bit better. You're not getting there twice as fast or more than twice as fast by making your PLM a little better. You need to think about fundamentally that your team should not be wasting their time in PLM all day, but the data needs to be there, the records need to be there, control needs to happen. But that mindset shift is really what I think's changed. And someone like Mobis early on kind of got that. And we've seen companies since, like Johnson Controls, working now with some like major automotive OEMs, aerospace and defense players, product design companies, consumer product companies, and they're just all kind of getting it. And the cool part now is we bring in a team of people who are new to CoLab, and they're going out talking to everyone time after time about this. And you really start to see, okay, this is not just a cute little app that we were talking about, 4 years ago. This is something that fundamentally changes how teams work together for, design review, for supplier collaboration, for cost reduction. And now you can show it. We've got some companies, one in particular on the cost reduction side, saving eight figures a year using CoLab, and the teams using it are more productive than any other part of the entire business. And it's not a direct coincidence, given it's been 2 or 3 years now of sustained results. So, I think one of the things we like the most, honestly, is founders, is those people really cared about us early on in the product and belief, and we cared a lot about them, but they still care now. Like, it's been several years later, and at some point we got to bring them all to Newfoundland to have some fun.
So we've talked a lot about these issues of collaboration. Jeremy, you talked about how it popped up when you were trying to do DFM with a supplier. Adam, you just talked about actually from the supplier side, winning contracts with the OEM, and then you briefly mentioned cost reduction. Where else are people using CoLab in their business?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I would put in like the 3 use case buckets. So like, if you start with design review, probably the place we were clearest from the earliest stages. One thing people have done a lot of, drawing review. Like, you people want to say it's all 3D. The reality is most engineering teams today are on a journey from what was paper to which is now 2D. They have 3D. They want eventually the 3D to govern everything, but right now it's not. It's like the drawing is the authority, the model supports it. And they're moving then eventually towards like a model-based definition or MBD future. There's a lot of teams still in that first bucket. It's all documents, it's all drawings. We see tons of people using CoLab simply to just cut that process in half. Like, there's no sending it around, printing it off, or downloading it. It's just like, click a link, it's open in your browser, do your red line, get out, move on. All organized for you, all the archives are there, and it's easy. Like, that's a simple case. You then see things like, we've got a massive gate review coming up, and we've got to all align around, a big concept. Instead of that being a big PowerPoint deck, which goes stale right away, they're putting live 3D models in, bringing in people from each group who normally don't have access to CAD, sending out the link, access it securely from your browser, walking through that process in a fraction of the time with way more ideas. You move into supplier collaboration, you're looking at things like, design for manufacturing, exactly the use case Jeremy gave sort of early on here. See teams trying to work back and forth with their supplier partners, teams working with other design partners on how to do that. And even now we're seeing people want to use it for, RFQs, POs, just really expediting those cycles. I think, like you said a moment ago, MJ, the latest thing we're hearing now with the way the supply chain is moving and the pressure to, get there faster, but at a better cost, but higher quality. There's a lot of focus on value engineering and cost reduction. So people are using CoLab to do virtual, collaborative, global workshops to basically improve their products, both from a value perspective and a cost perspective. and that's been a lot of fun. It was very tangible, very simple to run, and I think all of us have enjoyed working through those with customers to date.
Last October, in October 2021, you raised a pretty big round of funding. So clearly there's people out there that really believe in this vision. Jeremy, I'm sure one of the things people are most interested in hearing about is what's next from the product perspective, right? What problems are you going to go on to tackle with this new infusion of funding to go after this opportunity?
Yeah, we've got a number of exciting things kind of in the pipeline through the rest of this year and into 2023. One of the bigger challenges we're trying to tackle right now is around complex sharing. So Adam talked a lot about like engaging with your suppliers. I mean, it's the use case that I originally had in the beginning as well, but also other external sort of sharing use cases like RFQs. You may want to go out to multiple different suppliers with CAD data and ask for quotations. That ability to share CAD data to multiple different stakeholders and solicit feedback while still keeping everything kind of synced up and in the one place turns out to be like an insanely difficult problem to solve. And so we're putting a lot of focus right now and through Q3 into that problem, trying to solve that problem. That has the kind of side benefit, I would say, of IP protection and security. So if we can really crack that, there's a huge value prop there around protecting some of your most sensitive intellectual property for some of these companies. So if you're able to share, the basic concept is if you're able to share CAD in your web browser and have someone do the review they need to do and give you the feedback they need to give you without ever actually downloading or touching that native CAD data, that's a huge win from a security and IP protection standpoint. So there are a lot of big things there. A lot of sort of exciting, what I've been calling like innovative, collaborative, and communication tools as well that we're looking at. So a lot of the cloud-based tools nowadays have this concept of multiplayer, like being able to see in a Google document, for example, what the other person is doing, where they are in the document. We want to bring some of those aspects to CAD, and especially on the review sort of front. So you could share a CAD file with somebody, ask them to go in and review it, but also you can see that they're reviewing it, and you can kind of click on their little avatar and follow them around the 3D model and watch what they're clicking on. That's like a step change in terms of at the beginning of this call, we were talking about sharing files and screenshots and PowerPoint decks and annotations, and like it's just a step change in terms of ability to communicate around CAD and provide feedback on CAD. So exciting stuff like that, and also better integrations too with a lot of the systems and tools that are out there. Like again, from a ease of use and security perspective, being integrated directly with the PDM, PLM tools that our customers are using. Again, we're very open about the fact we're not trying to replace these, so we need to integrate with them well. So that's a large focus of ours at the moment as well. So those are some of the things we have on the horizon. Lots more, of course, but
Jeremy,
yeah.
Jeremy's got lots of good stuff he can't tell you. 'Cause that'll be the fun stuff you'll see later this year.
So Jeremy runs the product org, of course, as a result of that decision to switch seats a very long time ago. So Adam, you still sort of wear the Chief Business Development Officer hat, which means you talk to a lot of people in this market. So I'm curious, what are some of the trends that you hear through all of these conversations with all of these engineering leaders inside of organizations, and what's something that people are still missing right now?
So, trend-wise, I guess I've had like the blessing and the curse in this role. I've been doing this for a long time now, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing in the beginning. And also the market just was not ready. Like when we started this company, there was zero appetite for cloud technology, like just full stop. We would get in a fight every single time just trying to explain why we were a cloud-based tool. Now there's still, due diligence to be done, but everybody understands why this is the way things are going. And even those who don't are open enough to going through the process that I would say 95 times out of 100 come out the other side in the right place. So the first thing is like just adoption of cloud has like fundamentally changed perspective. The second is that people actually are starting to care about what it's like to work. For a long time, the attitude was just like get your job done, no one cares at all, just get it done. People actually care about the people, I think, now, and you're seeing that because companies are having retention problems, there's a talent war, like all those things have changed that. Plus, like COVID, going remote, like just life has changed. And the fact that they have crappy tools every day when they could go do something else is real. Like we see a lot of people do mechanical engineering, switch to software because it's just a better life. More money, better tools, more flexibility, like people like it. So people are investing in like technology that makes their teams more productive, more effective, more happy. I think the third part is that there was this attitude when we first started that the PLM should do it all. And there's this like unbundling happening in the ecosystem now where the PLM is a core part in that, but it's not the be all end all only way to do it, and it shouldn't be. It's almost a conflict of interest, right? It's your record keeping control system, and if that thing is super easy to work within, there's going to be mistakes. And that's the whole point, is that CoLab is this engagement layer that should make that data very accessible. It's immutable because it goes back to the source, integrated, but it should be fluid for you to work within. If you're going through doing a design review in CoLab, we get to the very end, everyone's aligned, you still got to click that big red scary button in PLM to say this thing is finally getting released at a wilderness, because that's not what CoLab is. When you're in CoLab, you're thinking creatively, you're thinking about engineering feedback. When you're inside your PLM, you're thinking about, all right, if I click this button, they're about to go manufacture a whole bunch of different things, or a major change is going to happen. And I think that's starting to be very well understood in the industry. You see analysts talking about it now. You see companies embracing it. You're seeing all these different trends around the model-based enterprise, which in general is talking about packaging tools together. It's not about a single source of truth. It's about an authoritative source of truth. And I think that's really what's working out. I think what's not well understood still is what are those puzzle pieces around your PLM. Like you've got a CAD tool, you got analysis tools, you got a PLM. Like those are very key pillars. Other big companies obviously manufacturing of ERPs and other tools, but they're not used to this like other stack. So like if you've ever seen a map of like all the software tools for marketing, there's like 500,000 tools and you can't even see the logos because they're so small, but they're in like 12 buckets. Those buckets don't exist very clearly yet. There's IoT and VR and AR, but like even those are so general. Like they're so general. It's there's just way more points of applications on the engagement front. I think that's what's not understood yet, is what should your tool stack look like and what are the right tools. But people are asking the questions now, looking. So ask me this question again in a year or two, and I think I'll have a very different answer.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. So Adam and Jeremy, thank you for telling us your story.
Thank you, MJ.
All right, this has been an episode of Peer Check. I'm not quite sure how we usually wrap it up, but I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and you can subscribe to the podcast or find it on any of the major podcast platforms, which is probably just Apple and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your day.